influence in our day-to-day interactions is precisely how social engineers will provoke an individual to take an action or to develop trust for somebody that they just met, or even in some circumstances to get them to divulge sensitive information that perhaps they have no business knowing, all because they were persuaded or they were encouraged in some way that didn't seem nefarious. And because of this, because of social engineering, because of human principles, people are a weak link in security because they can make mistakes. They can be fooled into doing something that's harmful or even violate company security policies. In fact, because we are human, this is the reason why we are the weakest link in any security solution. Think about how many times we're told not to use the same password for one website as we do for another, maybe not using the same password for our email that we use for other login credentials for our business, for our school. If you reuse those credentials and somebody manages to socially engineer it out of you one way, then that's something that could be used somewhere else. And using credentials over and over is not necessarily social engineering, but if you're susceptible to a social engineering attack in one way or another, and one of your credentials are found, access could be obtained and made to so much more. I also want to mention that social engineering affects every single one of us. Attacks are becoming more sophisticated, which puts not only us, but assets at risk, and we have to be aware of that. I'm going to go over some of the different types of security controls, and this diagram here is actually a defense in depth model, which you might go over if you start studying for the CISSP. But the defense in depth model essentially highlights a series of defenses which kind of which are implemented in order to protect assets that might be at risk. So on the first layer here on the outer circle, we'll see you have physical controls. And physical controls can be anything from locks on doors and windows. It can be swipe cards that you might use to obtain access to a building, or a key fob to gain entry to an office. Any kind of secured rooms. Physical controls might also include guards, security cameras, even fences and alarms. Those are all physical controls that someone or a business might implement to keep something secure. Then on the next layer, you have logical and technical controls. Logical and technical controls will often involve software and hardware systems, the mechanisms that are going to be used to manage and secure those software and hardware systems. Somebody might actually seek to circumvent these if the kind of control, let's just say somebody might send a malicious email to circumvent some kind of control that's in place on a software level or hardware level. And that malicious email might have a link for you to click that would siphon off data or install malware. That would be an example of trying to infiltrate a logical or technical control. Something interesting that I came about, I mean, I had heard of this before, and I saw another example where another way that somebody might seek to gain access to a logical or technical control would be simply leaving a USB drive somewhere in a common area, like a lobby. And if I were a business person going to my office and I saw that a USB drive might be left behind on the lobby, I might pick that up and give it to another employee to find out what's on it and get it to its rightful owner. I might plug it into my own device if I didn't know better. And that's the thing, that would be, that's kind of a combination of violating the physical control and the logical control, because physically you have a device that doesn't belong there. It showed up there. And then you have the act of somebody breaching that logical or technical control by plugging it in to an internal network. And lastly, we have administrative controls. So there on that third layer, these are often policies and procedures that are defined by an organization. So when you find that USB drive, if the organization says, don't plug anything in to your computer at work, then you should know not to plug that USB drive in that you found. Maybe there would be a policy in place to give it to security. And maybe that policy says, don't plug it in. you give it to the security team, you give it to the IT team, and they're going to analyze, where that came from and how it showed up there. Let them take the responsibility of trying to figure out what to do with it instead of putting yourself or your company at risk when you find that USB drive. You certainly don't want to be breaching protocols and rules that the company sets forth to keep you and your business safe at the administrative level. All of these controls are in place to protect assets and to protect the things that are important to the company. It might be intellectual property, it might be physical equipment that is owned on site, whether it's a manufacturing facility or just servers and computers within a building. It could be physical files. Anything that is worth money to the business is an asset that needs to be protected. Now, through phishing or through social engineering, we may seek to bypass some or all of these security measures that an individual or a business might have in place. So when you try and plan out, hey, how am I going to get access to something? How am I going to convince someone to do something? How do I get into the system? Maybe you've already done a preliminary assessment of what is reporting on their network from the outside, and you're not in, but you need to get in, and you need to find out, how do I get privileges here? How do I get the username and password that somebody uses when they log in? How do I impersonate a user? And you could do it the old-fashioned way if you have technical skills, and I know that some people on this call absolutely have those technical skills to be able to understand what's going on a computer network from a secured location. It's a lot easier to do it from the inside than it is from the outside. But instead of relying on what's publicly available from the outside, what if you took a moment to find out, how do I get in? Maybe I could sweet talk the person at the front desk to give me a little bit of information that will allow me to take it to the next step without them knowing about it. Social engineering attacks may convince somebody to perform an unauthorized operation, or this can convince them to reveal confidential or sensitive information. And all these little things that you identify as a social engineer, or that a social engineer might identify, could be put together to lead up to a real security incident at any kind of company. I mean, it's happened several times in history, and it's going to happen several times more until we have effective policies in place and everybody adheres to them. And even then, there's no guarantee that it will never happen again, because we're human. Now, this can be through, like I said, an email phishing attempt. Another common way that social engineers gain access without even having to leave their home would be through a Vishing attempt, which is a telephone call to the business or to the individual that they're looking to gain information or access to. It could be through text message. And aside from traditional text messaging, other messaging platforms such as Discord, Slack, Microsoft Teams, WhatsApp, all of these are ways that somebody can send you a message or send someone else a message to potentially get information, try and befriend them, try and earn their trust, try and do things to find a way in, either to their individual devices, to gain intelligence on where they work, what they do, what kind of software they run. I mean, any number of things. And if you think about it, a carefully crafted social engineering attempt is going to take into account, how do I fly under the radar here when I'm probing a vulnerability, that vulnerability being this human being? How do I get the information or access that I need without tipping them off that I'm not who I say I am, or that I don't really belong here? So really, the idea is an attacker needs to blend in. It can be done in person, and that is potentially more rewarding. If an attacker gains physical access to a location and they're able to blend in, they look like they belong, this is especially dangerous. What kind of assets do you have at the location? What can be done when somebody gets in? Maybe they plug in a USB device when nobody's looking at a computer at the front desk. They got somebody to, go to the back to check a file. and they have a USB drive in their back pocket. Now they've plugged it in. They didn't even belong in the building. Maybe there was a way that they got in, they didn't even belong there, but they were able to stall long enough to do something like that. Somebody can call you and they can impersonate your bank. Somebody could email and impersonate your bank and tell you that there's something going on with your account and you need to do something because it's locked. You need to go through some security measures, and they're calling you, and they've spoofed the phone number that they're calling you on. So it says your bank's name on it. Maybe they start by asking you some authentication questions when they call you, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, this is really important stuff. Like my accounts are locked and I need to make a purchase right now. You're flustered and you start answering authentication questions before you realize that you were just phished. And those authentication questions can be used to try and impersonate you on other platforms, and that's a real problem. Maybe they call you from their cell phone carrier, and they impersonate Verizon or T-Mobile or Sprint. And they say, hey, look, I'm an account manager in the fraud department and something's going on with your phone. We need to get it cleared out. I'm going to be sending you a one-time passcode. Can you verify who you are? That's all well, good, and fine if you actually had an issue and you verified that the person you're talking to is who you said they were. But if it's an inbound call, you don't know who you're talking to. And it's going to be so difficult to try and weed through that when somebody is effectively social engineering you if you're in a moment of panic. One more thing while I'm on this slide, I actually know of somebody who did receive a phone call from Verizon, who was their cell phone carrier, and they were encouraged to divulge information over the phone, such as their zip code, and I think they were asked for a one-time passcode that was sent to their phone. I heard about this after the fact, and I informed the individual that, hey, look, that doesn't sound right. Verizon's not going to call you and say your account's messed up and we need the one-time passcode we sent you, and we need your zip code for authentication. If Verizon had a habit of doing that, that's not good business practice. And most businesses are going to tell you, we're not going to ask you for your authentication code over the phone. Because if you give that to somebody, A, you don't know who you're talking to over the phone, and B, it's too easy for somebody who might have already socially engineered a couple pieces of information about you to put that together and then to take that passcode that was sent to your phone in an attempt to have sound two-factor authentication in place, and then to use that against you to access your accounts, change your password, lock you out of them, and do something much more nefarious. So I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about what phishing is. Essentially, phishing is a form of social engineering attack, and most of you will be familiar with not clicking on emails from individuals that you don't recognize, because they might be trying to steal credentials from you or other sensitive data. Criminals are going to oftentimes impersonate legitimate businesses when they reach out to you through email, through phone, through text, and in an attempt to try and encourage you to divulge that information. They might impersonate an authority figure or a friend or family member, all in an attempt to steal from you and potentially do some pretty horrible things. And sensitive data, you have to think about it. It can be anything from PII, which most of you would be familiar with this acronym, stands for personally identifiable information. But sensitive data can also be something obvious like banking and financial details, or credentials to websites that you visit. It might be something a little less obvious, like I had mentioned with that Verizon story where somebody gave their zip code and they thought nothing of it. And maybe they thought nothing of the passcode that was sent to their phone as well when they shared that. I think it's becoming more common knowledge that you don't share your passcode if somebody asks for it over the phone. But certainly the zip code, what's the harm in that? A lot of people can Google your name and find out the zip code that you live in pretty easily. But at one time, and I don't know if this is still the case, Verizon used a zip code as a means of authenticating you, in addition to a security question. And those two things were enough to change someone's password to gain access to Verizon Wireless's website. I really hope that they've changed that, because that's a terrible policy. And I know people that have been personally affected by it. I've certainly interacted with people that have been affected by it, up to and including having a telephone port forwarding scam where essentially someone got into their accounts and were able to do enough damage that they stole their phone number and ported it over to a different telephone. So all they knew was one day they went to use their cell phone and it wasn't working, whereas somebody who socially engineered them one way or another, I don't know the details, but somebody was able to get enough information on this individual and start using their cell phone and downloading apps and bypassing two-factor authentication, all because they got access to their Verizon Wireless credentials. And that's terrifying. You definitely do not want to get caught in a phishing scam, all because you got too comfortable divulging a piece of information that you shouldn't, something that seems innocuous. Here are a couple examples, and these are probably going to seem pretty obvious to most of you. Here on the left-hand side, we've got an email from Netflix, or something that looks like it's from Netflix. If you got this email and it's titled Dear Netflix, you know it's a scam right off the bat. I'm certainly seeing a hyperlink to visit your account. Looks kind of fishy. There is a tip, though, as you get a little more comfortable analyzing emails and finding out, hey, is this really from Norton Symantec, or is this taking me to a different website if I click on the link? There's a tip you can utilize. If you hold your mouse, let's say you're using a physical mouse instead of the trackpad on a laptop. If you hold it by its side, instead of having your finger over the top where the clicker is, you can use it to hover over a hyperlink. And that's a potentially safer way to investigate where that hyperlink is taking you than the default where you hold your finger over the clicker on your mouse. Because if you accidentally click it, like you're in hot water. You don't want to do that. So pro tip, if you want to investigate an email a little bit more and find out what's going on here, where is this link going to, you can hold your mouse by the side and hold it over a hyperlink to see where it's forwarding you to. Here on the right-hand side of this slide is an example of a text message that somebody received. And again, this might look pretty obvious. You have won $5,000 and this prize needs to be claimed right away. You know, to be honest with you, I think a lot of spam filters, both on phone and email, already siphon a lot of this stuff off. So if it's this obvious, there are filters in place that are going to help prevent your eyes from ever seeing a lot of this stuff. And I know that I see it in my spam folders, both on my phone and my email. You know, a lot of this stuff is siphoned off for me, but every once in a while, one's going to get through. And you have to have the ability to understand what's going on here with this email, what's going on with this text message, what information are they asking of me, are they legitimate? You know, what do I do? You have to know what to do when that happens. And here on the bottom right-hand side, I mentioned bank details or cramming. Maybe they're asking for bank details. Maybe they're asking for you to reach out to them and answer questions and do different things, because cramming is a scheme where individuals will text you from a paid text messaging service, where if you respond back to them, all of a sudden it's a charge that's going to show up on your account for each time you text them. I'm just going to check the chat real quick. See if anybody has any questions. Nothing so far. So cramming is a scheme to be aware of. Definitely, you know, these are a couple more obvious ones. I have some better ones here on the next slide, and it's kind of embarrassing. These are actual text messages that I've received on my phone. I'm going to share that with you. Here on the left-hand side, I thought this was kind of fun. Somebody had decided to text me and say, hi, I heard you're having a party this week and why didn't you invite me? It was from a number I didn't recognize. I wasn't going to divulge any information. I probably should have just sent it to spam. But instead, I decided I'm going to do the kind thing and let this individual know they have the wrong number. And then they continued with the conversation. Sorry for the inconvenience, please forgive me. And I'm thinking, okay, well, we can end the conversation now. Not a problem. Have a good day. And then it got a little weird. They sent a text message telling me how thankful they am, that I'm a kind person. It's fate. They gave me their name. Maybe they wanted me to continue talking to them. I shut that down right then and there. And you should too. Here on the right-hand side, I had gone through the trouble of blocking out my first name on all of those spam text messages that come in from random emails. And I haven't opened any of them. And somebody impersonated a 909 area code, which is the Inland Empire where Cal Poly Pomona is. It looks like it's someone local who sent me a picture. Again, I never opened this, and you never should open it either. You know, who knows what's embedded in that text message, what's embedded in that picture. I used to get text messages of like it looked like a pool table, like a game, and it had a play button. And, you know, needless to say, I didn't click on that either, because you don't know what's going to play if you click on the dancing cat video, if you click on these things that are sent to you. You really need to be aware and hyper vigilant whenever somebody sends something to you. You don't know who they are or what their intentions are. An example of vishing. So somebody can call you and you would say hello. And somebody on the other end might want to offer you a reward or something in order to distract you to try and get some information from you. I'm going to try and move this because it's in my way here.
It looks like Caleb's actually asking,
Oops.
you can get attacked simply by opening the message. I thought it would only be an issue if you click the links in the actual message.
I'm going to read that. You can get attacked simply by opening the message. You know, to be honest with you, I'm not sure that you can be attacked simply by opening a text message. Certainly, if we were talking about computer systems, if you visit websites or you have other things in the comment field, then code could be run on your computer just by visiting something that's been compromised. Receiving the actual text message, I'm going to have to look into that. I don't believe that you can be attacked just by receiving a message. There have certainly been.
I know how to.
Actually, there was Jenny. Since you're chiming in, I think there was a little while back with iPhone, with people sending text messages that corrupted their device. Are you familiar with that?
No, but I do know one that actually is very free and accessible, and even if you want to go and track people, it's actually very easy. So what I do is there's things called like tracking pixels. They're little transparent pixels. So if it's a transparent pixel, you can't see it with an email attachment when you're like opening up the email. And that tracking pixel is like, hey, okay, so actually let me rewind. So when you're opening up an email, what's going on with things like images is that it's actually requesting it from a server, right? So your email is asking, hey, server from whatever, can I please have the image from here? The server communicates with them. Obviously, from then, the server knows where your location is. So if I uploaded a blank transparent pixel, which is like a tiny little one, as an email attachment that you're not even going to be able to see, I can actually see what your IP address is, I can see what your location is, and I can see all this information just because you opened up the message and it's communicating with the server. So there is actually ways to do that, and I haven't seen anything malicious happen out of that kind of situation, but I do know that is something that I personally have seen and used. Pegasus, is that what one of the tracking pixels is? I do know quite a few mail services do, and actually what I do is I stopped incoming attachments when my friend showed me how to do it because it was very scary that he could see like how long I read, how long I was doing this, or all these other things. And I'm not sure if Cal Poly emails do filter it, but Cal Poly emails do have a lot of social engineering emails. There are a lot. If you have been a student here before, I'm sure that you can relate.
Jenny, out of curiosity, is that like similar or like on the same sort of trail as like the whole iframe stuff?
What do you mean by iframe stuff?
Um, I mean, I think it's within similar topic. It's a technique in cross-site scripting, but I've also heard it used in like email attacks where you include basically, a small HTML element that calls back to a server and they're able to extract, like you said, IP addresses and stuff like that, but also maybe like additional browser cookies and whatever if you're viewing it through like a web browser rather than like an email client.
Interesting. Oh, also shout out to Ryan. He's telling us about a very scary Pegasus tool that I actually haven't heard of.
Yeah, yeah, I've
So
definitely heard of
big shout out.
Pegasus. A big cause for concern, especially for political dissidents, journalists that might be tracked from Pegasus. In other countries are less friendly than ours towards journalists and people that have differences of opinion. But I don't want to get too off topic with Pegasus. So I'm going to circle back to Vishing. So one example of Vishing could be somebody calls you, you say hello, and somebody on the other end says, hello, this is so-and-so, a manager from your local Chipotle, and we want to treat you to a free burrito with guacamole on your next visit. If you could just answer a quick 3-question survey. And that seems innocent enough. I think there's probably a good proportion of people that would receive that phone call, especially if they happen to like Chipotle, if they go there, and this could save them upwards of $12 plus tax. So what's the harm in answering a 3-question survey? And then they show up to Chipotle and nobody's there to give them a free burrito with guacamole. Maybe they don't know the manager's name. I mean, it would be easier to impersonate somebody they don't have a personal relationship with. So I think this is a decent example of how something seemingly innocent can make you the target of a phishing scheme. And then in that 3-question survey, how often do you go to Chipotle? What's your zip code? Oh, wait a minute. Zip code was one of the authentication measures for Verizon Wireless in the past. Or maybe it could be something like, do you typically go to Chipotle with a friend? Do you have a friend that you want to assign this burrito to? Maybe that's your best friend's name that you just divulged. So think about it. When somebody's calling you and they're offering something or they're asking you for something. This is a picture that I found on the internet. It's not one that I took this year at DEF CON, but I did find it pretty interesting at DEF CON. In the social engineering village, I did spend a good amount of time there. And essentially, what the social engineering village was set up to do was there was a phone booth type setup and a timer, and people were encouraged to sign up to go in and participate in a live Vishing experiment. So they were typically given upwards of 5 minutes, and they had other competitions with teams that would last longer, but they would be given, I think one of my favorite ones, they were given 5 minutes, and they would be put in touch with a business, and some random business was called, and they were told, you're going to be Vishing this business, and we want you to find out these 3 pieces of information. One example of a business that they called was Costco. So they had to call Costco, and they didn't know about it until they were in the booth. And then they had to find out through going through the options at Costco, do you have security on site? Where's your security, so to speak? What hours are they there? Do you have public Wi-Fi for employees? And some other question. And if you come out and you ask that question, just point blank, when you call Costco, chances are they're going to hang up the phone on you. Why would anybody need to know if we have security on site 24/7? Why would anybody need to know about employee Wi-Fi? But where social engineering comes in is that there are some really talented individuals that volunteered to go up there, and it was fascinating to watch them come up with these ideas about, okay, what am I going to call? What am I going to say when I get in touch with somebody? what's going to be my strategy? And some of the individuals that did it were actually really good at trying to earn some trust over the phone with somebody they've never talked to before. Some of them got some information that maybe it wasn't precisely the information that they wanted, but they made a contact there. There was one instance where somebody actually talked to a manager at Costco. They got transferred to the manager, and it seemed very loose-lipped about the fact, yeah, we have security. Yeah, there's a Wi-Fi network, but I don't really know the details right now. But he was on the phone and he was given some of that information. He appeared to be effectively vished, even if not all the information was out there. That was certainly one of the better ones that we saw. Other individuals were asked to call businesses like Home Depot or Lowe's and get information. And really, personnel that answers the phone at a lot of these businesses, they've got one job, and sometimes that job is not answering the phone, it's doing other things, but they happen to be whoever's available. So they answer the phone and they want to get back to that job, but they also have a desire to help you because you called. And so if you're able to make a connection when you're on the phone for a short period of time with them, just to get one or two pieces of information, you could always go back and get information on a later date, maybe from a different location of Costco or a different location of Lowe's or Home Depot. And you could start to put all this information and understand, hey, how do they operate? What am I going to say when I call? What worked? What did they tell me about the systems that they use? How can I impersonate my way to get a little bit more information? Another thing to watch out for, vendors and door-to-door salespersons. So aside from getting phone calls, emails, text messages, this is really interesting. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Nextdoor app, but Nextdoor is an app a lot like the Ring devices that we have on our homes, comes with an app, and it notifies you about what's going on in your neighborhood. People love posting on there. It's essentially social networking for your neighborhood. And so if there's a vendor or door-to-door salesperson, someone oftentimes has something to say about that and any number of things that happens on their block. But I had an individual recently come to my house who presented himself as being somebody from Brooks Pest Control. And he had a polo on that had Brooks embroidered on the top, and he had a matching hat. So he dressed the part, and he had some kind of iPad or Android device. I didn't pay too close attention to what he had, but he dressed the part. He looked official, similar to this picture of this gentleman here in this picture. This guy's got an ID badge. He's got a clipboard. He's on a mission. So this guy that came to my house, I opened the door, and the first thing he says to me, are you the homeowner or do you rent? And that caught me off guard. I mean, it kind of ticked me off that somebody came to my door and they're knocking and they're asking right away, do I own or rent the home that I'm in? They're asking for information. I didn't think he deserved any of that information. So I said one of the two. And then he proceeded to ask questions about our business needs and if we've had pest control and things. And all the while I'm thinking, what's your angle, dude? And do you even work for this company? At one point I asked him, do you have a business card? And he said, no, I don't. I don't have a business card, but he's got an iPad and he's willing and ready to continue asking me questions. And I eventually shut it down. I'm nice enough to open the door and not slam it in your face, but I'm not going to give you any information. And you shouldn't either until you know who it is that you're talking to. And if somebody came to your door and you don't know them, you don't know them. It doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't matter how they dress. Other notable visitors that you might have at your place of residence or at your place of employment could include telecommunications providers. Maybe it's somebody who manages your internet services or your network devices. It could be a utility worker. A lot of residents have a gas line that needs to be accessed. Maybe not on the street, but somebody would have to go through their yard. So who's to say that a utility worker wouldn't be impersonated so that they have a seemingly legitimate business case to walk through your yard and do, who knows what on the side of your house for a few moments, unsupervised if you're not around. And all your neighbors know is that they see somebody in uniform with a clipboard walk up and and do any number of things near the cables that are coming out, potentially connected to other devices in your home. Anyone you don't know really that knocks on your door should be scrutinized. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about how we put it all together. So how does social engineering work? How does this happen? All the nuts and bolts and cogs turning. What makes an effective phishing or vishing scheme work for a social engineer? Well, essentially, like any good pen test, you have to start with OSINT and reconnaissance. For those that don't know, OSINT stands for open source intelligence. So this is information that you might be able to find on Google or social media. Maybe you have a person in mind that you want to impersonate, or you have a person in mind that you want to target, and you want to find out as much information as you can about that individual. You might go into a reconnaissance phase and try to find out, who their friends are, what their habits are, what time of day they come and go to work, what the building looks like that they work at. How are you going to socially engineer that individual? All those questions can be answered later, but the first thing you need to do is to start by doing a little bit of open source intelligence and reconnaissance in order to build a strong pretext, which I'm going to go over in just a moment. Also, when you actively go into a social engineering scenario, you want to start by building trust with your target. Nobody's going to let you in if they don't trust you. And some people are better at building trust than others. There are certain things that you can do to try and build trust with your target and to have them let their guard down, bring their defenses down. But ultimately, when you start to build trust with your target, or just enough credibility when you're in, or when you think you're in, that's when you can start to manipulate the situation for your benefit. I'm going to take a look at the text real quick. Doesn't look like we've had any other questions that I need to answer at this point. So a little bit about OSINT and reconnaissance. As I mentioned, the start of any good penetration test oftentimes begins with reconnaissance and OSINT on your target. So whether you're going in and you're trying to understand how a system is designed and what's connected on the network and what ports are opened, you might do that in an effective penetration test. But it's also important to know your personnel. It's also important to know the physical security of a location. If you're looking to construct a pretext, which is the next slide here, and you're looking to design how you're going to get access to someone or how you're going to manipulate a situation, you have to understand your environment. And it's kind of like piecing together a puzzle. You want to gather as much information as you can so that you can start to develop your strategy. Ultimately, you'll need to learn who your target is, how they might operate, and what kind of safeguards are in place at their place of business, or when they receive a phone call. They might receive a phishing email from you or a vishing phone call one day, and you understand, okay, that went to spam folder, or I got a reply here, I didn't get a reply. Or maybe you call them and you establish a pattern when you first call them, and you find out that, hey, their defenses don't seem to be all the way up when I present myself as this person or when I ask that question. So maybe next time when I call them several months later and they don't recognize me or my voice or the phone number that I'm spoofing for the third time, I'm going to ask different information to get to my goal. And eventually you'll start to define who your target is and what your goals are. What information do you want to get out of here? How is it going to help you get access to what you want access to? Who's your target? Who's the weakest link? As I mentioned earlier, human beings are the weakest link in any kind of security scenario. So are you going to ask straight to speak with the manager when you show up, the most senior level employee at the business that you wanted to go to in person? Probably not. If somebody's been in that business environment for 20 years, when you show up asking questions and looking to do stuff there that you don't belong doing, they're going to scrutinize that probably a lot more than the person that was just hired on a couple months ago. But you also have to be careful if you pick the newest person on the job, because oftentimes they're going to ask senior management or whoever's on staff that has more experience to say, hey, what do I do when this person's asking access for something? So it's a balancing act. It's an art form. Understand or find out if there's a gatekeeper at that business. And this could be metaphorically speaking or physically speaking. Is there a gatekeeper there? If you go into a business and you're looking to phish them or socially engineer them, is there a receptionist at the front desk that deals with people coming in all day, every day, that you're going to have to talk to and convince that you belong there? You might sit in the lobby and, you know, do somewhat of a shoulder surfing reconnaissance where maybe you dress the part and you look like you're trying to wait for somebody who's going to come down and meet you in an office space. So you're just sitting in the lobby on your phone. All the while you're paying attention to conversations that are happening in the background, and you're understanding who people are that are coming and going and establishing patterns. And you don't look out of place as you're sitting there. And you're learning how that person at that front desk engages these people. What kind of credentials are they asked for? Or what kind of identification badges? You know, how do they treat people? And how are they going to treat you when you come back in a costume? And it's a bonus if you find out who these gatekeepers are that you need to bypass or get access to, because they might have access to the CEO in the company. And that might be someone you really want to get a meeting with, or other people with privileges that you're trying to compromise. If you can't get past that front door or that lobby initially, oftentimes it's because there's physical security or there's a gatekeeper there. Maybe it's a security guard. That would also be really difficult to try and navigate, because their sole responsibility is making sure that people who don't belong don't get access to the building or to personnel or to assets that they don't deserve to have. But it's not to say that you couldn't devise a plan and a pretext to establish what you're doing and why you belong there. And it does work for some people. It does work for some people every single day. But if you find out what motivates that gatekeeper, you can use it to your advantage. Maybe you find out that, you know, Sally Smith sits at the front desk and she's advertised on her Facebook page that she works at that business and that she's a receptionist. Now you can start to find out information about Sally Smith, like maybe her favorite music, maybe what she does on weekends, maybe when she's going on vacation. If you know when she's going on vacation and somebody else is going to be sitting at that front desk, maybe that's a good time to practice your social engineering to try and get access, because it's going to be with somebody who's a little less versed in the protocol more often than not. And you might be able to leverage that for your benefit. I have somebody in one of my classes that said that they have friends in the military that they've hung out with, and they, you know, openly said, oh, they share stories, and some of the stuff they say they probably shouldn't. Well, yeah, that's a concern. Your personnel should not be loose-lipped sharing secrets, whether it's about operations or whether it's about specific things that could be used to compromise you later. If I had friends that were sharing stories of a sensitive nature and I was a threat actor, or I was just trying to befriend them so that I could leverage that to compromise something, that's a very serious situation. And you know, I mentioned vices here because I've heard of examples where, oh, well, you're going out drinking with your buddies, and then your guard's down when you've consumed substances like alcohol, and maybe those same people that were saying some secrets before are really sharing secrets now because they've had too much to drink. So understanding where these people are and how they operate, and if they have bad habits or good habits, any habits that you can try and leverage to familiarize yourself with them, or more importantly, catch them when their guard is down. Maybe they're out of town. Like I mentioned, you learned online that they're not going to be a gatekeeper that day or for the next few days on a holiday weekend. That would be the time to strike. Oops, went too fast. So this next topic I'm going to go over is pretexting. And pretexting essentially is a form of social engineering where a criminal, a threat actor, whatever, what have you, will create a fictional backstory that's used to manipulate somebody into providing private information or to influence their behavior. So essentially, this is the lie that you're constructing when you go into a business or when you pick up the phone and you call someone, or if you're on the receiving end, this is the lie that they're telling you is the pretext. Why are they calling you? You know, a pretext should answer the following questions. It should say who you are. So if you're effectively trying to social engineer someone, tell them who you are, why you're there, or why you're calling, or why you're texting. And keep in mind that they're going to want to know what is the benefit for them or for their business. Because if you're not benefiting them or their business, then you're under scrutiny. But if you come out of the gate and say, hey, I'm here to save you from whatever hassle you've been experiencing with your computer network, maybe they are complaining that their computer network's slow. And you're the savior that showed up that's going to go there and going to fix it for them. Little do they know you don't belong there, and you're going to connect malicious devices when you get access to their server room. But they've been complaining to upper management for the last several months that their internet's slow, and maybe you found out about it because you were sitting in the lobby and somebody joked about it one day. Or let's face it, I mean, it's a common complaint is that the internet's slow wherever somebody's at work. So you just develop that pretext and see if they'll take the bait. And your pretext, no matter what it is, whatever this lie is that you're constructing, it's going to be used to help you gain access to information or physical access to someone or something when you've constructed your target and you've identified what you're after. Another example would be that you could be conducting a survey for Google. So let's just say that you're calling a business and you say, hey, you know, this is Google services. We just want to do a quick 2, 3, 4, 5 question survey to make sure that we have up-to-date information online about your business. Are you guys still open from this time to this time? And, you know, you could even tell them some off time just to have them, you know, throw them off a little bit and have them realize, well, wait a minute, that's incorrect. Like, of course, I want my business to have correct information, and I'm receiving this phone call from Google. I mean, it's just enough to potentially confuse somebody. That pretext could potentially work if you're trying to get information and you're going to want to layer in the information that you really want to obtain, because you're not going to come out saying, hey, I'm from Google, you know, what time does your security guard leave? Hey, I'm from Google, do you have a Wi-Fi password that you want to share with me over the phone? No, but if you start to earn some trust and you have a conversation with somebody and you notice that their defenses are down, when you're developing your pretext, have a series of questions that you want to get out of that individual that you're interacting with. And there's a good chance that you might be able to get 1 or 2 if they're innocuous enough. And if you do a really good job earning their trust, it could potentially lead to a lot more. This next slide, I found some items of interest for sale on eBay I just wanted to share with you. And I wanted to ask the question, who's a sucker for a man in a uniform? Here are 3 items that are for sale on eBay right now. I took this yesterday. One of somebody from the United States Postal Service, one from FedEx Express, and one from UPS. It wouldn't take a whole lot more besides the $20, $30 to purchase this shirt and have it shipped to you to complete the outfit, to put on some pants that would match with it or some shorts, and to show up to a business and to find out that, hey, they've got this physical security, they've got a fob that you got to swipe to go into the building. Maybe you sat in the parking lot, you know, the week prior and you learned that FedEx always shows up at like 3 p.m., but UPS never shows up, or vice versa. UPS always shows up around 3 p.m., but FedEx doesn't typically go there. So you could be the individual that would show up in a FedEx outfit. They don't normally get FedEx packages. And so if you're the new person showing up, excuse me, representing FedEx, and you want to get access to the building, maybe parking far away and getting a dolly with a bunch of packages on it and trying to follow somebody in to see if they will hold the door open for you would be a way that you can get access to that building. As you establish your pretext and you try to define yourself or present yourself as somebody that belongs there or has a business need there, you can construct some kind of story as to why you don't have keys or you're new or whatever. Keep in mind that building trust has to be top of mind when you're interacting with somebody, whether it's over the phone, in person, if it's a social engineering environment, you have to build trust. This is bigger than your tactics, and it's your entire mission. If somebody doesn't trust you because you come across as too salesy, if you come off as too aggressive, you're not going to get access to that information you want. And I think these are the situations where somebody is most likely to be successful in a social engineering type scenario. Building trust. There's a number of ways that this can be done, whether you're on the receiving end of somebody trying to build trust with you, or whether you're the person in the social engineering engagement trying to build trust with whomever you're speaking to. So first, you have to know what you're talking about. You have to learn about whatever it is that your angle is when you've built a pretext as to why you belong there, who you are. So if I say that I'm a representative from Spectrum and I'm there to fix their network because they have network issues, I better have some equipment that looks like I belong there. I have to be able to speak intelligently about what could be going wrong with their network. Oh, well, we were pinging some of the devices and we're not getting a response. There's obviously a loose connection somewhere. We're going to have to check that in your server room. Act like you know what you're talking about. Do some reconnaissance on what it is that you're presenting yourself as before you get there. Because if you show up and you're stammering and you're not really sure how to sell yourself as that person that needs to have access, or if you're vishing somebody by picking up the phone and you're trying to sell yourself as an expert from Microsoft, you better know a thing or two about Microsoft operating systems and what they can click on if you're going to vish somebody and tell them they need to click on their computer and do XYZ. Otherwise, you're not going to get very far. And it's important to be sincere when you engage with somebody, because if you don't sound sincere, people are going to pick up on that. And, you know, it's going to take practice. Some people might be naturally better at sounding sincere, but if you waver, if you don't sound trustworthy, then that's going to hurt you when you try to engage somebody in a social engineering capacity. Be polite and act kind. When you're asking for somebody to do a favor for you, especially if it's a breach in policy, you're trying to earn their trust. You're trying to get them to hold the door open for you in a building. You know, you're not going to do it by yelling at them and telling them, hey, hold the door as you're running across the parking lot. You don't belong there. But if you're kind and you just happen to make yourself available at the right time and place, and you say, oh, thank you, you know, could you please hold that for me? People are much more receptive and people are much more trusting when you start by being kind and polite. And on a psychological level, there's a lot of things that people do, whether it's in sales or you know, inadvertently when there's trust being established through body language. You can try to emulate mannerisms. If somebody has their arms crossed, you can try and cross your arms, although that tends to be more of a closed off body language way of presenting yourself. You might want to make sure that you're open and you know, that you're smiling and that you're trying to engage somebody. You look interested. Be mindful of the tone of voice that you use, whether you're on the phone, speaking to somebody, excuse me, or in person. Are you being considerate? Are you elevated? Are you panicked? just be mindful of those things and make sure that it goes along with your pretext and that you're not sabotaging yourself by, losing their trust. And also pay attention to your pace. You don't want to be rushed unless it's part of your pretext that like you're in a hurry. You don't want to be rushed when you engage someone. Try to exercise a little bit of patience and know that some things could come up that would seem to be taking a turn in the other direction. And you have to be prepared to be calm. But if it got to a situation where you wanted to exit the room or the situation because you think, wait a minute, like I might have been found out, be calm. I've got to get something in my car. I'll be right back. Politely exit. And maybe try your phishing attempt or your social engineering attempt another day or at another corporate location if it's a physical environment that you're looking to breach. Most importantly, be confident in the reason why you're there and why you're phishing somebody or why you need access to something, and don't back down. When you talk to somebody, you have to not only act like you know what you're talking about, but you have to act confident that you're there for a reason. Your boss sent you there because they were on the list and you needed to talk to somebody to really help them with their network that's got some issues. And I know I can fix it. I just need to know where your server room is. I spoke with your manager last week. Be confident when you speak to somebody or over the phone, and the way that you can develop that confidence, it's going to take some practice if it's not natural to you, but you can also start to have practice with friends. If you're looking to build a pretext for something and you want it to feel more natural, maybe talk to yourself in the mirror. Not something that I have a habit doing, but some people who are looking to practice social engineering or practice building confidence around a situation might do some of these things. So make sure that you're confident, that you dress the part, that you look like you belong. Are you going to blend in and sneak into the building looking like somebody that might have an office there and sit in the lobby for a little bit before you leave and go unnoticed? Or are you going to dress the part to get access to the building because you don't have a key fob and maybe you want to be the FedEx person that shows up with a delivery? Lastly, it's important to lead by asking questions. Whoever asks all the questions in a two-person dialogue typically kind of, for lack of a better word, dominates the situation. So if you're the one that's asking all the questions because you want to present yourself that you belong there, or that you're legitimate when you call somebody and you're trying to help them with something and you just got this work order, you're trying to get their computer up and running. If you're asking all the questions, it gives them less time to think and it gives them less time to question you and what your purposes are. But again, there's got to be a balance between you leading with questions, because you could frustrate somebody very easily if you're asking a bunch of questions, and understanding, what information you're going for, giving them an opportunity to speak, but making sure that you reassure them along the way that you belong. You belong on the phone with them and you belong in person. And it's going to go a long way if you anticipate some of the questions that you might face that you're going to need to answer. It's not always perfect if you find yourself in a social engineering engagement and somebody starts asking you, well, who did you speak to that you say told you can come into our server room? You should be able to rattle off a name, and it would help if it was somebody who's not there that day. And it would help if you knew that they aren't inclined to pick up the phone and call them on their day off. But just have an answer for a lot of these things. Maybe that's not the right pretext for you. If you're going to a physical location and you're looking to get access to something and you're looking to compel somebody to consider that you spoke to somebody else and they said it was okay. It could work in some situations. There's a number of social engineering strategies where that I'm going to go over here that allow us to catch people when their guard is down and potentially influence them to do things that maybe they've been told not to do because it's going to put you and the business at risk. Let's start off by talking about the principle of authority. because people are likely to respond to authority with obedience. So if your boss calls you or sends you an email message and asks you to do something, there's a high likelihood that you're going to do it and you're not going to question it. Or if an officer of the law pulls you over, or somebody with a higher position than you don't question that. You usually don't question that. I mean, if it doesn't make sense, if it's a violation of policy, you should question that. And hopefully there are protocols that management share with you so that if something doesn't make sense, there's a chain of command that you're going to, make sure that the security team does a double check, or you have some other kind of checks and balances in place. But if a person in a authoritarian capacity were to ask you to do something, oftentimes our desire is to do that because it feels like the right thing to do. And the trick is to convince your target that you have the valid authority or the capacity to be asking them to do whatever it is that they say whatever it is that you want them to do. So if you're calling from the fraud department of their bank, you might say, I'm a senior manager here and we have issues with your account and it's going to be locked down, but we need to verify a couple of things so it doesn't get locked down. I'm a senior manager in the call center of your bank, and it says your bank when I'm calling you. That would be an example of authority being implemented because I'm a senior manager. Or an example could be somebody spoofing the email from a CEO that goes out to the company or goes out to an individual and says, click this link to get this survey done. Or individuals in uniform that show up, hey, it's the FedEx guy or the FedEx gal. They belong here. Maybe not so much in an authoritarian capacity, but they belong here because they deliver packages all the time. Yeah, I know that this happens. I'm going to let them in. I'm going to hold the door open for them because they have a business need to be here. Anybody else that claims to be a manager might be an example of exploiting that principle of authority. And another example I included at the bottom, authority can be implied. You can say you spoke with the boss. You spoke with Shirley last week and she said you were having some server issues. I was told to check in with you, with Jason, to just show me the server room so that I can get this buttoned up for you. I shouldn't be in there for more than 15 minutes. You can stay with me if you want. You probably wouldn't say that, but essentially you'll imply that there's no issue with why I'm here. I got permission from your boss. I got permission from the corporate office. The corporate office says that I belong here. I think it'd be really interesting if someone were to socially engineer a business by saying, hey, I got permission from the corporate office. I'm just talking to you, Mr. Manager, Mrs. Manager, and we're here to fix something, or we're going to be there this week. Does Wednesday work for you for us to come by to do this service for you? If you can already get a yes from the manager, then they're probably not following protocol. Or if they are following protocol, you could find out about it very quickly and maybe disengage when you get there. But chances are, if you set it up and you say, hey, I have authority from your corporate office to be here and do this, and you get a yes from somebody that would be tasked with letting you in, that's a huge win. Intimidation is another way that people seek to use authority, build confidence, or use the threat of harm to motivate somebody. And this is something we have to be really careful about. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a great way to build a pretext by intimidating somebody who's just at their place of business, especially if we're looking at the world of penetration testing. It's not good practice because when you mess with people's emotions, something can happen. Someone can get really hurt, whether it's, internally or, they panic, and it just, you don't really want to rely on intimidation. But there are some aspects of intimidation that, aside from being out of scope in penetration testing, that might compel someone to have a sense of urgency or a desire to help you or to help get the situation resolved, because now they're under pressure. They're fearful that they're going to lose their job if they don't help you get this information because you found some dirt about them or whatever. As penetration testers, we don't want to hurt or cause irreparable harm to somebody. So it's important to remember that we're professionals and it's our duty to be ethical. But if you're going to use intimidation, it could be something as simple as sending an email saying that their account's going to be locked and they have to click on something in the next 48 hours to avoid it being deleted. That's certainly one example where somebody might try and phish us or compel us from a social engineering standpoint to do something where our guard's down and we're worried that we're going to lose access to something. And, now we're scared, we're intimidated that it's not going our way if we don't take this action. And that's how this intimidation tactic works. Consensus. This is very popular. A very popular way of social engineering in all aspects of our lives, where somebody, whether it's in a sales environment or if it's in a social engineering penetration testing engagement, using social proof to take advantage of a person's natural tendency to do or mimic what others have been doing or have done in the past. So an example would be the boss is out of the office and you go to this business and you say, hey, your boss told me last week that I could get this discount for this item for the trouble that I had, and you have this store and you're trying to get this discount. You just effectively socially engineered them. If they say, okay, that sounds like something he or she would do. They might have given a discount. I have the authority to be able to give you a discount. Or if you ever go to a restaurant or a bar and you see a tip jar and it's like full to the top and you're paying for your order and you realize, oh shoot, like everybody else has been tipping them, like they've been working hard. It's like 95 degrees outside here in Southern California today and they barely have AC running. Like, I feel bad. I feel like I should tip them because the consensus is everybody else is doing it. I need to also be a good patron and tip them. Scarcity. Something valuable is rare, a rare opportunity, like those phishing scams that we're all familiar with that hopefully go straight to the spam folder, but they say, hey, you just won, you're the benefactor of this money from Nigeria. I'm the crown prince of Nigeria, whatever. We're all familiar with those types of emails, trying to say this is a rare opportunity. You won the lottery. There's only a couple concert tickets left to this concert. You clicked a link and you found that there's 2 concert tickets left to your favorite band. Are you going to check out now, or is somebody else going to check out for you and get in on this limited, rare, once in a lifetime offer? Familiarity. This is a technique that people might implement to try and exploit somebody's trust in something that's familiar. So oftentimes, if you're building a pretext and you learn that somebody might have certain cultural values, maybe they're similar to yours, or maybe you know enough about whatever they're sharing on social media to be able to say, hey, when you show up, I'm familiar with this, like I belong to this religious organization, or I have these other shared cultural values. And it just kind of comes out in conversation. Maybe you both like Pokemon and you show up and you're like, yeah, Pikachu's my favorite character. Maybe you're wearing a Pikachu shirt that day. And it's just so happens that you both love Pikachu, but they didn't know that you were coming in trying to phish them. And now they instantly gain some kind of respect for you, or they feel like you have some kind of common ground. So it's a heck of a lot easier to get somebody who realizes that you both have this commonality to start to build a little bit of trust with you, even though in actuality, that should have nothing to do with why you trust somebody you just met. But familiarity is an example, and it can also be used by mentioning that you have mutual friends or experiences, finding other kind of commonalities that you might have with the target during your OSINT, or spoofing who you are and what you represent so that you seem more relatable to them and help them bring down their defenses. Trust. I had a slide where I spoke about a lot of different ways you could build trust, and you have to ask yourself, when you're defining your pretext, if you're building trust with the victim. And, for everything that I've been saying, also consider, are these things that might have been used against me at one point in time? I know I've certainly fallen victim to some of these things over my lifetime, clicking on things that maybe I shouldn't have, that showed up in my email or my phone, and phone calls that you get and you're thinking, why did I share that information? And hopefully those experiences have made you stronger, because we're all susceptible to having our trust be broken in a situation where somebody's trying to get access to something or learn something or try to get you to do something. But it's important, at least after this workshop, to consider, is somebody trying to build trust with me, and have they earned it? Because essentially, when somebody's looking to build trust, they're working to develop a relationship with the victim. And this can be for as little as they need or as long as they need. It could be for a 5-minute phone call with you, and they're trying to establish themselves from a position of authority, or it could be somebody that you just meet by chance. They found out that you work for this company that's a target, and they've befriended you because you both frequent the same coffee shop, and you've talked nothing about the business in person, but as the attacker, in the back of your mind, they work for this company Monday through Friday. We haven't even talked about that. I'm befriending this person. And that's especially scary when somebody can violate the trust that you've built, but it's not impossible. I don't know if anybody's watched Better Call Saul, but there's certainly some examples in that show where trust can be built and broken over and over again. Attackers are going to rely on the value of the relationship that you two have in order to incite the target to reveal sensitive information or to perform an action that goes against company policies. So back to the example I mentioned earlier, where there's an individual in one of my classes that says, I hang out with these people in the military and they say things that they probably shouldn't. Well, there's a level of trust there that's been gained for one reason or another. I don't know. If that person had nefarious intentions, they could absolutely violate that trust over some beers or, over some pool or whatever, to try and get just a little bit more information that could be used for something negative. And lastly, using urgency. Again, this should feel familiar, but urgency is not necessarily something that somebody needs to include in their pretext in a phishing email to you. It's something that could be more masterfully constructed by doing other things that compels you to feel like you're in a situation where you need to act on it. And again, this is a very realistic social engineering scenario where urgency, often related to the principle of scarcity, is an attempt to get a target like you to act quickly and do something that otherwise, you wouldn't do, because time's going to be running out, or an opportunity is going to be missed, or something's not going to work out right if you just don't click this button, if you just don't do what you've been asked to do through email, through phone. And an individual's natural inclination when they're under pressure, when there's a sense of urgency that's being bestowed upon them, is to think, oh, shoot, I need to do something. There's a little bit of panic. There's a little bit of panic when there's a sense of urgency and there's a time frame in which they need to get something done. Hopefully, every single one of you takes a moment to think and to breathe through whatever situation is presented where somebody's expressing a sense of urgency to get something done to you, especially if they're asking you to do something that you've been trained not to do or that doesn't make sense. It's always okay to hit the pause button and say, wait a minute, I need to look into this. But somebody who's preying on your sense of urgency doesn't want you to take a moment to think about it, because maybe you won't answer the phone again when that phone call comes in from the same phone number that they're calling from. This attack's going to seek to interrupt your individual ability to think through an issue, and it's going to encourage you to act immediately. So now we're going to put it all together. I do have a counterpart, or rather a person that I had reached out to help me with an example here on this call today. And I'm going to introduce her in a little bit. But first, I'm going to go into an example where we're going to do a real live Vishing experiment. And I've asked somebody from Temple University, who's a part of the Cybersecurity and Application Research and Education Lab, or CARES lab for short, to help me put it all together, some of these concepts, and show you what a real life Vishing scenario might look like. So I've put together an idea of my target. And that target is going to be the CARE labs at Temple University, which is located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I did a little bit of OSINT, and I discovered that they have a phone number to a student-run lab at the university, and they have a department specifically that focuses on cybersecurity research projects, and they also have graduate students who work on projects in conjunction with the lab director by the name of Dr. Reggae. My pretext is that I'm a young man by the name of Stephen Pearson. I'm a senior student of computer science at Arizona State University, and I'm hoping to share my capstone project with the CARE labs and schedule a meeting with the director. I'm going to be modifying my email header to make it appear as though I'm sending from spearson@asu.edu when it gets to a point where I'm going to ask to send an email to this individual. So I have a couple objectives. Going into this, I'm going to seek to schedule a meeting with Dr. Reggae. I have a data set that I've been working on that is a part of my capstone project for this year. And essentially, it encompasses cybersecurity attacks and how they've evolved or changed with the implementation of artificial intelligence and defensive systems like intrusion protection. And lastly, I'm going to inquire about any kind of special projects that they might have that they're working on. I'm going to see if I can get a little bit more intel from the CARE labs when I place this outbound call. So I'm going to go ahead and pretend like I'm calling the CARE labs right now, and I have Rachel Blayman on the line who's going to assist me. So, Rachel, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Ring, ring.
Hi, this is Rachel at the CARE Lab. How can I help you?
Hi, is this Rachel Blayman?
It is.
Wow.
Ask
My
who's
name's
calling.
yeah. My name's Stephen Pearson. I'm actually a senior student that I'm looking to apply to work for you guys and to start going to school there. And I saw your bio on the website. I didn't really expect you to answer. That's really cool. Are you working there?
Oh, are you trying to apply for the grad program?
I am applying for the grad program next year. I'm a senior at Arizona State right now,
Oh.
and yeah, I've been working on some projects, and I'm actually really excited. I'm hoping to get in there, but yeah, like I said, I really didn't expect you to be answering the phone right now. That's
Yeah,
so
I mean,
cool.
you're lucky you got anyone at this point. We're about to, pretty much all head out. I'm like the last one in here. But yeah, I do have a few minutes to talk. How can I help you?
Okay, great. Because I just had a couple questions. Like I said, I'm a senior student. I'm actually working on a capstone project right now for my computer science program.
Okay.
And we've been going over some data, and I'm a big fan of what it is that you all do at Temple University. And that's why I'm like really eager to start working with you guys, and hopefully I can get into the master's program. I think I have a strong enough GPA, but I
Cool.
was reading about some of what you do and how you work with Dr. Reggae. And I was wondering, what kinds of things I could do to just increase my chances when I apply, because I'm looking to apply here in the next few months.
I mean, if you go to our, university, like our department, we have a bulletin website, and it tells you all of the like the whole application process. I don't remember exactly, but you need like letters of recommendation and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'm sure any extra projects look good. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I saw that on the website. It looked like you guys had like some ransomware projects you were working on that seemed really interesting to me. And
Oh
actually,
yeah, the CARE Lab website.
yeah, no, I was at the CARE Lab website, and I have some data that I've been working on. I'd love to just run it by Dr. Reggae if she's available.
What do you mean you have data?
Oh, I have some data. So I'm actually doing a research project, like I mentioned, for my capstone, for my computer science degree. And for my research project, I'm actually looking at how cyber attacks have evolved in the last 10 to 20 years, especially as systems have evolved to try and detect different things that are happening, like with intrusion protection systems and other ways that AI has been incorporated into cybersecurity. And
Cool.
if I could like chat with you and Dr. Reggae about how I might like better extrapolate the data. I've been using Tableau. I don't know if you guys use that at all, but
I've never used it. Oh, so are you looking for like mentorship type thing?
yeah, I really would love to just chat with like Dr. Reggae about like a mentorship program if you guys offer that, or really just position myself for an opportunity to become a student there. Because like I said, I'm a big fan of what it is that you all do at the Care Lab. And like that's my passion. That's what I want to do when I get
Okay.
my graduate degree.
Okay. Yeah. So I would recommend probably sending an email off to Dr. Reggae and, telling her you're an undergrad and is interested in the program, because I think professors do meet with prospective students. I'm not really sure because I'm just a grad student. I didn't really meet with as a prospective student myself when I was applying. But if you send her an email, and tell her you're working for a project, I'm not sure how much time she has available, like to be able to mentor you and stuff, but she can definitely probably talk to you about the program.
Yeah, that sounds great. Do you have an email address?
Yeah, it's just reggae, REGE at temple.edu.
And you, if I remember from your bio correctly, it seemed like you had some cybersecurity projects that you were working on.
Yeah, I got a few projects going on right now, but they're mostly still in the works.
So nothing complete yet, nothing that you might be able to have someone who's just coming in help you with.
No, I'm not really sure how it works either with different schools and, with undergrads working on projects. I know the projects I'm working on are kind of solo ones. And Dr. Reggae, like she has her grants, but I'm not really sure if, funding and outside school. Yeah, I'm not really sure how that works. So I would just email her directly for that one.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I can do that. And with regards to my project, like I mentioned, I'm doing this cybersecurity research. I'm just really hoping to get somebody who understands the field a little bit better than me, because like I said, I haven't even graduated yet. And this is something I'm really eager to go in and learn by doing with you guys. And if I could just get a little bit of feedback about the work that I've done so far, or maybe the direction to take it, because I've been using Tableau and it's great software. I mean, it'll take a lot of data and help you extrapolate it and come to different conclusions. But I don't know what kind of software you might be using.
You said you're at ASU, right?
Yeah.
Do they like there's no like professors there who have been able to help you with this kind of thing?
We do have different professors there, and I've been working with them, and I'll certainly been working with them a lot more this year, since that's part of my senior capstone project. But like I said, I'm trying to put my best foot forward as I apply to become a student at your university, and certainly to work with you guys. And so
Oh,
I think your perspective is huge. I mean, ASU
yeah.
has a program for it, but we don't have anybody that specializes it in the level that you or Dr. Reggae do. So
Gotcha. Who have you been working with at ASU? Because Dr. Reggae, might know them. She might not want to step on anybody's toes. I don't know.
sure, yeah, no, there's a professor by the name of Mr. Peterson.
Peterson. I don't think I know Peterson. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, they haven't been able to help you much.
Like I said, I'm just starting on the project, so they are helping, but my whole idea was I wanted to put myself in the best position to be able to start as a student at the Care Labs. So if there was anything that I could do to just make my application look a little bit stronger, or if you had any insight, maybe a different perspective than the
I
one
think
that
if
I'm getting at
you, take the project that you're working on and you complete it, turn that into a publication, that would look really good on an application to Temple. If like you have that project completed and have a publication for it coming in if you have time for that.
Okay,
But is there
great.
anything else I can do for you? Because I do, I'm about to head out. So only just a couple minutes.
Yeah. Could I actually get your email? Because like I said, I'd love to just share this information with you and get your perspective.
Yeah, that's fine. It's just Rachel.Bleiman, BLEIMAN @temple.edu. You can send me an email. I'll go back to you when I can with that.
Perfect. Because yeah, it's just an Excel file. It's a lot of data that I've been pulling together, and any kind of perspective that you might be able to add or offer would be much appreciated. I'm working with my professor at ASU, but I'm looking at talking with you at the Care Labs and some other universities that I've been looking at applying to, but really Temple's my number one, and I just would love to work with you guys and hopefully get accepted here next year.
All right, cool. What did you say your name was again? I'm sorry.
Stephen?
Steven. Okay, well, hopefully then I will see you around next year, Steven, and I'll look for your email.
Yeah, absolutely. And with regards to Dr. Rege, is she typically available on during the week? If I were to email her for a time to meet?
I'm not really sure too much of her schedule. I know she has, a lot going on, a lot of meetings and stuff. So yeah,
She doesn't have an office hours it's posted, or I tried to look online, but since I'm not enrolled in any of her classes, I don't really know when a good time to try and bother her would be.
Yeah, I mean, she has office hours for Temple students, but for outside, I would just shoot her an email and see when she answers.
Okay, I can do that. Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Rachel. I really appreciate it, and I hope to meet you someday. I've really been inspired with what I saw on the website, with everything that you've been able to accomplish and what you guys are working on at Temple, and hope to be admitted there someday.
Yeah, well, good luck. I'll let Dr. Rege know maybe to expect your email. Tell her I spoke with you.
Okay, great. I'd really appreciate that. Thank you, Rachel.
Yep. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. You
See
too.
ya.
Bye.
Bye.
So we're going to go over a debrief here. I'm going to ask Rachel to let me know how I did, and be honest, I can take it. I didn't really expect to get a whole lot out of a Vishing phone call, especially with university as accomplished as yours is, with regards to cybersecurity research and social engineering. I mean, this is probably the last place I would try and Vish if if I was looking for a target. But I appreciate you joining the call today, Rachel. And for those who don't know who Rachel is, haven't met her before, Rachel Bleiman is a graduate student who's studying criminal justice at Temple University, who's focusing on the human factors in cybersecurity, including misinformation, online privacy, and cybercrime. She's also a research assistant with the Cybersecurity and Application Research and Education Lab, and she is the president of the Women in Cybersecurity Temple chapter. So, Rachel, now that I've introduced you, how do you think that Vishing call went?
Looks like I was on mute, maybe. All right. Well, you definitely came in with confidence, which is good. That's one part of Vishing is, you need to be confident in yourself. Someone in the chat, Jennifer, yeah, giving off too much information to push a narrative can be suspicious. So you were on the talkative side, and that could, just be a personality trait. It could be a nervous thing. But, if you ever get a phone call and someone just keeps talking, and you're like, okay, get on with it, that can kind of push the other person. Even if it's not suspicious, it can just kind of make them like, all right, like, I want to go. Especially when you think about things like, day of the week, time of the day. Like if this was real life and, I'm on the East Coast, right? We're in Philly. So if it's almost like 6 o'clock on a Friday and someone calls me, like, I'm not going to want to stay and chat and like make so much small talk. Yeah, Jennifer, if someone gave me that call, I probably would be like, okay, yeah, I got to go. Email me. I'll talk to you later. But it was good that, you knew your story. I asked you a few questions, I asked you your name again, made you confirm, where you go. ask you about, your professors at ASU. So that's the kind of thing that you want to be prepared for. And that's part of the whole OSINT process, the open source intelligence process, right? Sometimes, I don't know how much OSINT you were able to do beforehand for this, but, when you're a professional Visher going into a call, you do as much OSINT as possible to prepare. And sometimes, you do get asked something that you don't know and you have to think on the spot. So I don't know if you just made something up when you answered about your professor, or if, you had that research.
I made that up. If you look for Mr. Peterson, I don't know if he exists.
Yeah. So, and even just you calling him Mr. Peterson and not Dr. Peterson, it was like, if you're like applying for like grad school, like you're familiar with, everyone's a professor, doctor, whatever. So if it were something more sensitive that I was worried about giving away, I'd probably be a bit more suspicious. But because you were just coming in asking for, seemingly harmless stuff, I was like, okay, whatever. He's an undergrad. I'll let him do his thing. But it was good that, you tried building some rapport in the beginning to build that trust. A lot of complimenting. So like kind of that ego boosting, which people typically like, as long as it comes off natural and it doesn't seem like you're just trying to make someone else feel good, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Another part is with Vishing, you want your pretext to be simple. You don't want anything to be too complicated, which I think you did. You're trying to apply for this. There was some things where it's like, oh, it's not quite a logical conclusion to come to us for help with your project if you have a whole department behind you. So that kind of was a little bit suspicious. But overall, you stayed confident in your character and you stayed in character, which is really important. And you stayed very polite, positive, kind throughout it. Like your tone of voice was really good. So it's good. Because another thing with Vishing too is that you want to leave the person better for having talked to you. You don't want to leave them distraught or anything like that. Obviously, in this situation, it was something, pretty benign. You weren't doing anything like super terrible that would get me in trouble or anything. Or you weren't using any scare tactics or urgency on me, because those are really good persuasion principles and social engineering techniques, kind of what you were talking about earlier, authority, urgency, all of that, the fear tactics, that's good, but you want to keep ethics in mind when you're doing this, especially when we do Vishing, we're doing it differently than when, cyber criminals do this, right? They're not thinking
Sure.
about ethics. Obviously you didn't have any ethics problems in yours, but yeah, overall, nice. I think, you had your pretext, you stuck with it. And yeah, the more OSINT you do, the better your pretext will always be. But it was a nice start. I don't know if anybody
Great.
else had any comments about that Vish call.
Anybody else? Questions, comments?
Cool.
All right, so my next slide, after we've gone over this presentation, we're going to wrap up here pretty soon, but I just want to encourage everybody to have a zero trust mindset. And what that means is that you want to let every interaction begin in an untrusted state, whether somebody's reaching out to you, anybody that you're meeting for the first time, they're knocking on your door, it's a text message you receive. Don't start by trusting somebody. You can be polite, but know where you stand when it comes to the information that you hold near and dear that other people might seek to access, even if it's something as innocuous as a zip code, a best friend's name, or hobbies that you have, because it could all be used against you at a later date. So if you treat every interaction as something where your trust needs to be earned through going through your checklist, not by what somebody's telling you, but does this pass the smell test? Did they do what they're supposed to when they entered the building. Do they have a fob? Do they belong here? Are they on the list of employees? Does their ID match? As long as you don't cut any corners there, and as long as you keep top of mind when you receive inbound phone calls, messaging, that interaction needs to begin in an untrusted state. Something doesn't make sense, you're going to pick up the phone and call them back at a number that you verify, not the number that they give you. Then that's going to put you and your security practices in a much better place. So to go over some best practices to keep you and your business safe, you want to hold regular trainings about phishing and social engineering. It's important, whether it's on an annual basis or semi-annual basis, to have your employees aware of the different ways in which somebody might try and phish them by email or phish them by phone or SMS or whatever. It's important that everybody's aware. If nothing else happens, if your employees know, hey, I need to be aware when I receive this, I need to go through these checks, you're going to be that much better at the end of the day for it. It's important to have specific protocols for verifying vendors whenever they come into the building or anybody else who's requesting access. Because when somebody comes in with a believable pretext that they belong there, and you either don't have protocols for what to do when somebody shows up and they want access to your server room, or you're not familiar with them, don't let them try and talk you out of not looking into what you need to do. They can wait. They're showing up. You need somebody to verify. If you're not going to be that person, you need somebody who you can go to, who you trust, to verify that they belong there and that they are who they say they are. Don't let people into restricted areas, such as holding doors open for individuals coming into a building. If you need a key fob to go in, it's just common sense. But everybody wants to be nice as human nature. And so oftentimes doors do get held open for people that might not have an access code or a key fob. And if it's ever a situation where you want to get a second opinion about whether someone needs to be there, let the security guards handle it. Hopefully you have security guards in an environment or somebody who's responsible for vetting people in a building if there are safeguards in place like security access codes and things. You don't want to share information about yourself or your colleagues freely on social media. This is really important. I think a lot of us are all too comfortable implicating ourselves, where we're going on vacation and how often and when that's going to take place. When we share that kind of information and it's public, it can be used against us. Don't trust, but verify. Every single time you have a question, verify the backstory, verify what's going on and what somebody's trying to do. And most importantly, don't get lazy. I know that it's all too easy when you work for a company for X amount of time to assume that you can determine whether or not somebody's trustworthy when you are approached and whether or not they should be able to have access because you've done it all before. That could be part of their pretext. They've been there before, now you believe them, you get lazy, you don't follow protocol, you let them in. But it's going to be your job on the line. It's going to be your business. It's in the newspaper for all the wrong reasons if that happens. How do you know if you're getting phished? I mean, a lot of this should make sense, especially at this juncture of our talk, but sensitive requests that are made of you that should be in person. Somebody asks for your social over the phone, don't do it. That should be in person. Maybe if you call a business and you know that you looked it up on Google and you didn't look that up in a panic and click on an advertisement inadvertently, but you verified that that phone number you're calling is a business and it's commonplace to share your social with them, then maybe you can do that. But generally speaking, I know that there's a lot of people that choose not to share their social security number over the phone at any point in time. And that's a really good practice. I think that that's one that if you can follow it, it should be followed. Be mindful if somebody says that there's a sense of urgency to do something because that's trying to get you to compromise yourself or your business. And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Be mindful of that. Any kind of hyperlinks that are misspelled or redirecting you, and anything that generally seems out of ordinary about the sender. Also, any kind of requests that are made of you to violate policies or accepted best practices could be a phishing attempt. Scrutinize those. Beware of requests for personal information for you or even about others that you might know or work with, because if somebody doesn't have a need to know, they don't have a need to know. Remember that. Any kind of lack of identification could be a red flag, but even if somebody has fraudulent identification, that could also be a way that they can phish you or phish you rather, or socially engineer you into believing that they belong and that they have the credentials to do whatever they want to do. Real quick, I'm going to go over some red flags with this email. We're coming up to 2 hours. I really didn't expect to take 2 hours, but I'm glad that I was able to take some time with you all today. Look at the from line from a sender in an email to identify if it's within your organization or outside of the organization. If it's outside of the organization, you should scrutinize that a little bit more. If it's inside of your organization, does it make sense that you're receiving this email? Are they asking you to do something? And again, does it make sense? Also look at who the email's to. If it's to just you, okay, that's all well, good and fine. But if it's to you and a bunch of other individuals that don't necessarily do the same kind of thing that you do, you should scrutinize that as well, because it could be the sign of a phishing scam, even the date and time that it was sent. If it's sent at an odd hour, like 3 a.m., when everybody is asleep and nobody's really transacting business, that should definitely be something that you question. Look at the subject line. Does it match what's in the body of the email? Does it express a sense of urgency? If something's expressing a sense of urgency, our default should be to slow down and ask what's going on, not to rush and do something. Unfortunately, that's a weakness that we all have inherently as human beings. Look for attachments and don't open them unless you have a business need, you know who the sender is. And if you have a business need and you know the sender, you should be able to pick up the phone and call them directly and verify, hey, did you send this? Because I wasn't expecting an attachment from you. And if they say yes, and you know that there's a business need, then at that point, it might be safe to open the attachment. But also be mindful of the type of attachment. If it's an executable file, that might be a little more peculiar than if it's a Excel file. When you're looking at spreadsheets in Excel all day, that might make a little more sense. Not that that can't be compromised, but if you've already vetted it at this point, that it's coming from the person who says they're sending it to you and that there's a legitimate business need, then it might be okay to let your guard down. Also look for any kind of hyperlinks. Look for misspellings in hyperlinks. This example says Bank of Arnerica. It's not an M, it's an R and an N, as in Nancy. So misspellings could direct you to another site designed to look like a legitimate site, only to compromise your credentials. And lastly, just to reiterate, look at the content of the email. Does it make sense? Does it express urgency? Is there anything that gives you a funny feeling about it? If so, get a second opinion, send it to the spam folder, or send it to your security department, because a lot of businesses, a lot of larger companies have a security department where there's protocols in place for you to send spam messages or any question of spam to them to get a second opinion. How to stay safe from phishing: question and verify everything. Inbound phone calls that you receive, inbound text messages, emails that you receive, even if it looks like it's from a legitimate source, it could be spoofed. Even if they say they have a legitimate reason to be reaching out to you, they're asking for sensitive information, don't give it to them. Do your research and reach out to them directly. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Don't fall victim to these very principles that so many people do. And unfortunately, is going to be a work in progress for businesses all over the globe for the foreseeable future. You want to have a healthy dose of skepticism anytime you interact with visitors, whether it's at your home, your place of business. Don't assume that just because somebody has a uniform on that they belong. Don't click links or download things if it doesn't make sense. Ask if you can call somebody back if they call you, so that you can give yourself time to verify who you're speaking to. And most importantly, don't panic. Go through all of your checks, even if somebody's trying to place some urgency on you. And again, I want to reiterate, don't get lazy when your company asks you to do certain protocols and certain things to verify somebody has a business need before you let them in, before you do whatever they're asking you to do. Because when you get lazy, you overlook those checks and balances. That's when compromise can happen. Does anybody have any questions today that I might be able to answer?
Hey, Andrew, great talk. I think we did have one question a little bit earlier in the chat. I know a couple people chimed in, but maybe you can also give your point. It's from Shrusti. She said, how can a hacker social engineer in absence of a physical office? I think, oh, she sent also previous questions in regards of how you're like a lot of orgs have shifted to a virtual office. So would a physical security, at least from a organizational perspective, in the traditional sense, be vanished?
So to answer that question, with regards to physical security, that would not be vanished because you still have to secure the assets of the organization, whether it's in the cloud. If it's a hybrid cloud setup, oftentimes there's going to be servers somewhere, there's going to be physical equipment that's going to be used or relied upon. So that still has to be secured. Even if you consider that you have a relationship with Amazon Cloud Services and you've outsourced all of your data to be stored on their networks and their servers, physical security is still top of mind. Something like Amazon does have locations where they keep their servers running and their equipment running, and they don't publicize where those are and what they entail. And you best believe it that they have a lot of security in place to make sure that if somebody shows up and has a business need or says that they have a business need to be there, that they're going to go through the ringer to find out whether or not they should have access to that. With regards to security without having a physical office, still human element, login credentials, humans are susceptible. They could inadvertently reveal something that might have their login credentials exposed. Maybe in their off time, they're downloading stuff on their computer that ends up infecting them with a keylogger, and whatever their login credentials are for the VPN could be siphoned off by somebody that helped influence that keylogger from being downloaded. So now that there isn't a physical office, there's a virtual offsite location. There's a way to tap into that the employees have, even though they don't have a physical office. And if somebody was able to capture those credentials, obviously they'd be able to get in and have access where they shouldn't.
Awesome, thank you. And then someone else asked, are the slides available to share? I would say, would you mind sending us the slides over? Maybe we can post it in the Discord. Up to you, up to your consent, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Perfect. Hope we could definitely post those in the Discord so they're available to you along with the recording.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for coming today. I'm really surprised that I was able to talk for 2 hours and do this. I didn't think it would take a full 2 hours, but hopefully you all learned something today. And if you didn't learn a whole lot, hopefully it was a good refresher or a good experiment into what's out there, how social engineering happens, and more importantly, how we really need to protect the human element and be vigilant with regards to security policies, how they're implemented, because nothing is foolproof, and fools are born every day, and people do make mistakes, and there are ways in which all of us, even myself, could fall for something if the right pretext and context is delivered to me to be able to divulge something that maybe I shouldn't. So we should take that as a learning opportunity. If we ever find that we are ourselves compromising our values or sharing something or oversharing something, and really do a little bit of soul searching and find out, how can I do better? And how can I make sure that my organization is going to do better as a whole? Because we don't need employees clicking on phishing emails or giving out information that's going to allow somebody to compromise the network, especially if our very job is to protect networks and people that are serving our company. and keeping our intellectual property safe and our assets secure.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any other questions before we end the meeting?
Just like to say, Andrew, that this was an excellent presentation.
Thank you, Dylan.
A lot of good stuff in there.
Thank you, Dylan. I appreciate that. It took more hours to put together than I had planned, and I'm glad that it all worked out and that we had some exposure. You know, I want to thank again my partner that was able to join the call from Temple University. She's no longer on the call, but I did get a chance to interact with her, both Dylan and I, during our social engineering competition. And it's pretty cool, the kind of research that they're doing over there. Obviously, social engineering is top of mind with how they approach cybersecurity. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Ryan. And it's really refreshing to see that there is a lot more than just the technical side of cybersecurity being promoted and analyzed, because while that is so important, there's obviously so much other opportunity and area that needs to be covered in order to make sure that you have a holistic approach to keeping people and businesses secure. I think there was one more question from Norberto. Could I give an example of proper verification protocol when a pretext seems reasonable? So hypothetical school should have done in order to filter information requests. So proper verification protocol when a pretext seems reasonable. I mean, I think if you have an inbound call, you need to verify everything and just don't believe anything that somebody says when you have an inbound call until you can verify it. So verifying afterwards, making sure that you're not giving any information. One thing that Rachel did when I was prodding for information for things to happen was that she encouraged me to send an email. And while it's feasible that I could do some kind of compromise of their systems by sending an email, I did get their email address. It would be hard for me to keep the lie up when I send them an email from a spoofed .edu address, if and when they analyze the headers and they realize that it's spoofed, which is something that you can do. If they try to reply to my email, they're going to realize, oh, it did say that it was from someone at asu.edu, but really it's being forwarded to this other address that doesn't really match. So that would be a red flag. But I think she did a good job by asking for us to send an email. Something they advertise on their website is if you're asking for data set information, you can make a request for that. They make it available for ransomware like projects and things, but the request has to come from a .edu address. So if I tried to use my Gmail, personal mail, Proton mail, whatever, they would not entertain that because they have a little more common sense than to do that. So that would have been something that I think I would have been caught on. Does that answer your question, Norberto? One other idea I had with regards to proper authentication, if you're representing a business, then there are certainly questions that you can implement to say, these questions need to be answered before you start giving information. Let's say you work for a health company or a hospital. Somebody needs to be able to give you information. Maybe it's 3 or 4 pieces of information to verify who they are. And the problem with having information get leaked on the dark web or otherwise these days is that, you know, somebody is going to have their social security number out there, their date of birth. Maybe they compromise themselves by sharing some of this on social media. Maybe it was just made available and they need to be a little bit more cautious with any business they deal with. If somebody calls a hospital and they already have some of that information, it may or may not be enough. So defining policies that can have like due diligence and good faith effort behind ensuring that somebody that's reaching out to you is who that they say they are before you entertain giving information or taking action on someone's account is going to be really important. And that's probably going to vary from business to business. But there are ways, and certainly implementing two-factor authentication, sending a text message from your business, making sure that they have their cell phone device. That's a really good way. It's not a perfect way, but in our current day and age, that's one of the better ways to ensure that you're interacting with somebody that should have that privilege. Great. Well, thank you everybody for participating and for joining me today. I hope you all have a great weekend, and I will certainly see you all around here this quarter and hopefully, or this semester rather, and next semester at Cal Poly.